Ho ho, book lovers! August. August has been a good month for me. I read 8 books. 8 books. So let's take a look at what they are. I'm going to go through them in the order in which I finished them. So, first up, a beautiful book by Janet Fitch, The Revolution of Marina M. This was my 3rd time reading this book. Historical fiction. It's about a young poet. That's a poet, which is a word my wife always gets me to repeat because of the way I say it in my Scottish accent. A young poet called Marina M. Marina Makarova. And she comes of age during the 1917 October Revolution. And it's a period of history that I'm fascinated by. Most of you will probably know that, who've been on this channel for any length of time. And it follows Marina as the daughter of a liberal called Dmitry Makarov. And he becomes one of the provisional government in Petrograd after the fall of the Tsar Nicholas II. And he's a member of the Cadet Party, which is the Constitutional Democrats, so the Liberals. And after February, when the provisional government takes over after Tsar Nicholas II falls, the place is in turmoil. And young Marina goes off to the Stray Cat Cafe, and she gets to meet her hero, Anna Akhmatova. And we then follow her life as she lives through that period of turmoil in Petrograd. Of course, the provisional government falls, gets kicked out in the October coup when Lenin comes to power with the Bolsheviks. And we follow her story, which is quite harrowing. But she's a strong character. And the way that Janet Fitch has researched this, honestly, it's just incredible. So full of detail, names, places, historical events, little things, big things. We get Marina being captured by the Cheka. We get her mother being taken, or not being taken away, but disappearing. And we get 2 romantic paramours that Marina gets involved with, one of whom is a speculator. And I loved his story. I really enjoyed following Collier's story as he learns how to navigate the turmoil and to make a living buying and selling contraband. And she gets caught up with a gangster as well, which leads to a pretty harrowing scene. And I won't say any more than that, lest I spoil it, but I just found it to be a fascinating historical fiction novel. And obviously I love it because it's my 3rd read, so, you know, if that tells you anything. Also, the audiobook by Yelena Shmulinson is exquisitely read. Obviously, Yelena speaks Russian, and so when she pronounces the names of the places and the people, it really adds to it. And there is some Russian in the book, enough that it puts it in its place and its time, but you don't need to know Russian to understand it. And the context in which the Russian words are used make it quite clear what's going on. And Akhmatova's in it, so that's pretty cool as well. I'm reading an Akhmatova poetry book just now, which is over there, so I'll show you that another time. For September, I'm going to be going through the sequel, which will be my 2nd read. I only read that one once before, and it's called The Chimes of a Lost Cathedral. So it carries on with the story of Marina after the end of this one. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. Again, with Yelena Shmulinson reading the Audible book, but it's a really nice hardback copy that I have here with beautiful pages, which I just love. So, Revolution of Marina M. I bumped it up in my review to 5 stars because, I mean, you don't read a book 3 times and have it be 4 stars, which is what it was. So, and we'll move on to this one, which is not the order in which I read them, but it ties in nicely with Marina M. A People's Tragedy by Orlando Figes, which is, as the title suggests, about the Russian Revolution. This is the second Figes book I've read in a couple of months. I read Natasha's Dance last month, or the month before actually, and I set this one up to read in July, realised I was never going to get through it in a month, so it took me 2 months to get through this, and wow, just wow. And it was as I was reading this, I was like, yeah, I really want to read Marina M again, because they just go together so well, non-fiction and fiction, all about the same period. And so when names are mentioned in here and events and things which had probably passed me by in Marina M the first time, they started to take on so much more meaning. Like Brusilov, for example, the general, who was quite famous for a battle in the war, the Great Patriotic War in Russia, which is the First World War to us. And he had a successful battle that took place, and it's mentioned in Marina M. And we follow his story in this book in quite some detail. He ends up moving to fight the Civil War with the Whites, and then he defects, I guess, to fight with the Reds. Just kind of following the history. A very, very interesting character. But that's an example of a character that comes up in fiction and in non-fiction. The way it's done is just tremendous. Figes' writing is very, very engaging. It's not dry and difficult and challenging. I mean, obviously the period is challenging and the history is challenging. The way he writes is so engaging, and that's why I love this book so well. It really brings the Russian Revolution into your imagination. You know, it puts you there, and in a kind of fictional way almost. The way that he mentions some characters, like there's a character who, Semyonov his name is, and he was a peasant who lived in a town called Andreevskoye, and he was kind of a liberal revolutionary in that he wanted to bring the lives of the peasants, to give them a better life, to use technology. So he'd learned about farming techniques, for example, and he wanted to bring some of those things that he'd learned to the peasants, to the countryside, to help them to farm more efficiently and have better lives. But he was up against the old guard, the old believers, the ones who didn't like change. So you've kind of got the conservatives and the liberals, you know, much as we do now. And this is going on in the Russian countryside. And he was actually exiled after one of the elders grassed him up and said that he was involved in witchcraft and killed his baby and stuff like that. So, you know, but he came back, and then he helped with the farms, and it's just an example of bringing a real character into this sort of crazy, chaotic time in Russia, much like Marina M was, but this guy was real. So Figes has researched him, and his research is impeccable, you know. And he, just the way he tells the story, if you want to read a book about the Russian Revolution, this is the one. I mean, I've got plenty more that I haven't read, so it could be that I'll read another one that's even better, but for the moment, I'm going to say this is hands down the one to get. This is a 25th anniversary. Oh no, it's a 100th anniversary edition of the Revolution, so this must have come out in 2017. And it's got an introduction and stuff. So, yeah, highly, highly recommend this book. 5 stars. Right. So that takes care of the Russian history side of what I've been reading. Let's get into the philosophy. Right. Ted Gioia, a Substack writer, a journalist, a music lover. he launched a 1-year course on reading the humanities a few months ago. And I picked it up, thought, this looks fantastic, I'm going to do this. And he set it up to read a book a week. I thought, no, that's not going to work for me. So I've actually started my own Substack where I go through his weekly recommendations over a calendar month. You might have seen on my channel that that's what I've been doing. And the books that he set for week 1 were The Last Days of Socrates by Plato, and another Plato book, The Republic, or Republic, depends which translation you have. This one's called Republic. So it's translated by Christopher Rowe, and The Last Days of Socrates is translated by Hugh Tredennick and Harold Tarrant. So I read The Last Days of Socrates. The full book was on the list. I never read any philosophy before, certainly not ancient Greek philosophy, and first of all I was surprised at how simple it was to read, and deceptively so, because you read these dialogues, the translation is done in such a way that it's easy to follow, and some of the arguments that they're making, or that Socrates is making, because this is where Plato is documenting the words of Socrates. It's not that challenging, but when you dig deep and you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, okay. And it brought some things home to me. This follows the tale of Socrates' trial. So he's on trial for sedition, or what's the word, impiety. So he's corrupted the youth, and he's bringing new gods into being, and blasphemy and stuff like that. So it's about his trial, basically. And it goes through 4 dialogues: Euthyphro, Apology, Crito, and Phaedo. I've made lots of notes, so if you want to get all the notes and stuff and follow along with this, rather than have me just go through what it's about, you can follow my Substack. That's probably the best thing to do to get my thoughts on it, because, as I said, I'm totally new to it. I'm feeling a bit of an imposter in some ways doing a Substack, because I feel like I should be an expert if I'm going to be running a Substack, but the point is that I'm the opposite of that. I'm a newbie, and I think that the thoughts of a newbie might be interesting for other newbies, and to help people who would like to read this kind of thing but feel intimidated by it, to come along and see that it's not scary and it's fun, and if I can do it, you can do it. So if that's of interest to you, hit me up on the Substack. And we've got Plato as well with Republic. The set texts for this were just 2 parts, books 1 and 7, I believe. But because I've extended it from a week to a month, I was able to go through the whole thing. And I'm not going to lie, some of it challenged me, and I didn't really follow it all that well. And some of it resonated with me really hard and made me think about all kinds of things. And so I've been going through it, taking little post-it notes, sticking them on the book, taking highlights. I think this is a good method, actually. And what I do is I take photographs of the highlights and I add it to my database, my Notion page, and then put them out on Instagram as well. Try and make sure that I'm writing stuff down and taking it slow, and not just making it seem like a box ticking exercise. You know what I mean? I want this to be something I learn from, and don't just think of it as something that when I get to the end of it I'll be like, I ticked that box, without really have taken anything away from it. Does that make sense? Of course it does. Of course it does. Right, so hit me up, camscampbellreads.substack.com. You can join me. And these next, we're going to be reading the Odyssey over 2 months, because, it's a big book and can't read it in a month. So it would have been 1 week with Ted. 2 weeks. For me, 2 months. Right. Moving on to something completely different. Ship of Destiny. the third of the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb. My second reading. I had committed earlier in the year to one book from the realm of the Elderlings a month. So that's 6 months in a row. I've managed to stick to that schedule. And I read this first 2001 and I hadn't read it again since. So my memory being what it is, I'd totally forgotten what it was about. So I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the Farseer trilogy. Nevertheless, yes, I enjoyed it immensely. But I ended up, I think I gave this 3 stars. 3 stars, yeah. Why would that be? I think perhaps there were too many characters, too many points of view. It got a bit confusing. I did enjoy the characters. I found this a really good book for travelling. If you're sitting on trains and boats and cars, as I've been doing the past few months. It's an easy book to get engaged in. Don't have to take notes, don't have to worry about making content on it. Just enjoy it as a fantasy read. But yeah, it wasn't as good as Farseer, I don't think. Would I recommend it? Hard to say. I suppose I wouldn't have read it twice if I didn't enjoy it, but yeah, not as good as Farseer. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So how many is that? We've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next 3 are not physical possessions. So let's go with Mistborn. The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So I'm a big fan of Stormlight. I've read all of the available Stormlight books twice except for Rhythm of War, which I've read only once, but that was quite recently. And I'm ready for 5 when it comes out in December. But I've never read any other Brandon Sanderson, and I know that Mistborn comes highly recommended. I have watched a lot of Stormlight Archive videos on YouTube. I'm interested in the Cosmere. I'm interested in some of the crossover that comes between the different books in the Cosmere. So I got Mistborn on Kindle and Audible, and I stalled on it for quite a long time actually. It took me 3 months to get through, which is unusual. I listened to some of it when I was driving, which I do quite a lot around Argyll and the Isles, and I got about a third of the way through and realised that I'd skipped big chunks and I wasn't really taking it in, so I started again and I read in tandem with the Kindle sometimes in order to consolidate and get the characters in my head and get to learn what the relationships were and to understand how the magic system works. And it is quite complex. And I'll say that I suppose the last quarter of the book I blasted through it, and I did get quite engaged by then, once I'd got to know the characters. And when I finished it, I was still feeling a bit down on it and thinking, well, it took me so long, I probably won't continue. Feels a little bit YA for me. But then after a couple of days had passed, after finishing the book, I found myself still thinking about it, and so I was like, maybe I'm being a bit harsh. Perhaps it's a good series to have for the driving that's about to commence in September as my Masonic career starts up again. The whole hamster wheel starts to spin again and I have to travel a lot, so they're good books for that, and I think I probably will continue. So yeah, I can't remember how many stars I gave it. Probably 3. That would be my guess. That's what I'm giving it now in my head. So 3 stars for The Final Empire, and yeah, I will continue. I will. I like the characters, so okay. Next up, detective story, spy thriller, Slow Horses. We watched it on Apple TV. Gary Oldman playing the lead role of Jackson Lamb. Jack Lowden playing the role of River. Absolutely loved the TV show. We finished season 3, waiting for 4, which comes out next week, I think. and told a friend of mine in the local Masonic Lodge, and he got the book out of the library after I told him how good the TV show was. He read it in a couple of days, loved it, and brought the book for me. He's like, I thought you might want to read this. So yeah, I said okay, so I borrowed it off him, and I also read it in like 3 days, because boy oh boy, as spy thrillers go, yeah, it's not quite John le Carre, but close. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was exactly the same as a TV show, with barely any deviations whatsoever. So I don't know if it's worth reading any more of them, because if they follow them that closely, and I've already seen the TV show, yeah, I could just leave the books out after that. But I did enjoy reading it, thoroughly enjoyed it. If you haven't read it, and especially if you haven't seen the TV show, and you enjoy a good spy thriller, British spy thriller, as I do, then definitely Slow Horses is one to look out for. So that's 6, 7. That just leaves one more, doesn't it? Okay. The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, which I started in January. Got it in Kindle, read some of Jonathan Haidt's Substack posts. Some Tower of Babel or something is his Substack. And I like his writing that's about the damage that mobile phones are doing to the kids. And not just the kids, to society. I thought that's an astute writer with an observation that I kind of agree with. I've got kids myself, I see what technology's doing, and I'm not an anti-technologist at all. I'm in my phone a lot as well. It's just an interesting thing to read, and I thought he's a good writer. I enjoy his take. So when I heard about his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, I think I got it through Mo Gaudat, whose books I've read 2 of last year, and I like Mo's writing about finding happiness. I think one of the books he wrote is called Something Happy, Being Happy, Finding Happy, something about happy. So yeah, Jonathan Haidt's a psychologist, and he's written about ancient wisdom, Stoicism, and he's kind of brought that forward. It was amazing how it tied in with some of what I read in the Republic, Plato's Republic. They went hand in hand like that. It was remarkable, actually. Plato's probably the most famous chapter from Republic is about the cave, the allegory of the cave. And Jonathan Haidt mentioned that, but no, it was another allegory that he'd used. It was basically the same, without referring back to it as being a Platonic thing. So I don't know, or a Socrates thing. It was the same idea, though. The idea that what we see, what we conceive of, isn't all that there is. We're only seeing shadows. That's the allegory of the cave. Is that people are stuck in a cave. There's a light source behind them, and all they can see is shadows of real things. But because they've never left the cave, they think that the shadows of the things are the real things. And then somebody gets set free from the cave to go up to the surface, and then he gets to see that things aren't what they thought they were, that things are so much different. And then he has to go back into the cave and try and explain to his fellows that what they're seeing isn't real, and they think he's batshit crazy. So Jonathan Haidt talks about it as a country called Flatland, which is 2D, and a sphere comes along. And because the sphere's 3-dimensional, but the Flatland people can only see it in 2D, and the sphere has to try and explain to them what 3-dimensionality is all about, and they just can't conceive of it. How do you explain something that's inconceivable, And then he goes on to talk about like psychedelics and how they can lead to awe-inspiring experiences, and he talks about some of the research that's been done with placebos and with controlled studies of hallucinogens and how that plays out and stuff is quite fascinating. And you know, I've always been of the opinion that we don't see everything, we don't know everything. And how does that lead to happiness? Well, I suppose his conclusion is that, well, I don't actually know. Having just read the book, there were a lot of things in it that stood out. I only just finished it today, so I haven't really regurgitated on it. Regurgitated? No. I haven't really thought about it that much. I've not had time to let it sink in. And I have got quite a lot of Kindle notes, so I should probably go through the Kindle notes and come up with a conclusion about what the happiness hypothesis really is. And because it took so long to read it, don't know why that was, but right, that was my reading for August. You can see that my Oasis page has loaded. I've been waiting all day to try and get tickets without any luck. It's not looking good. But I'm going to try. Coming up for for September. This is already long enough. So I'm not going to go into TBR here. I'll do that in a separate video. So if you're interested in what I'm going to be reading in September, come and watch the next video when it's ready. Subscribe to the channel. You'll see it when it pops up on your feed. And I look forward to sharing that with you. I'll probably record tomorrow, so I'll get that out very soon. Thanks for watching. I hope your month has been good as well. Yeah, if you've read anything I've read, let me know. I would love to hear from you. If you have any ideas about what the happiness hypothesis is, if it's any good, something you can relate to, you know, that's a good discussion to have. I do have a Discord server that I've started up for going through the humanities course. So I'm discussing Plato at the moment. I'm posting also my screenshots and photographs and stuff into the Discord server, which at the moment is free, so I don't know if I'm going to lock that down or how that's going to work out, but at the moment it's free. So is the Substack, so just come along, see what it's all about, and I look forward to figuring it out as I go. And as I said, it's all about bringing people in who are a bit intimidated by that kind of content, as was I. So it's good fun. Come and join me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.